Welcome back to part two of what you're trying to assume really happened. We've got James Booth 3460. Thanks for the videos. I love them. Good. Thank you. Sarah gaslighted him into the suitcase. Let me explain. If you notice, she liked to call the police on George after he went to sleep claiming abuse. Oh, we've noticed. You can see the police waking and arresting him numerous times on the body cam. Yep. He was always in shock and confused. That's right. We also saw her own videos of her waking him up, screaming at him, accusing him of abuse. I think he was passed out that night and she woke him up claiming she had called the police on him and that they were on their way. She told him to hide in the suitcase. I think he got right in and the rest is history. Very, very possible. Very possible. She planned this murder for some time, make no mistake about it. Imagine if this was him doing that to Sarah, they would not have offered him 15 years. They would have charged him with first degree murder and he would be on death row right now. Yeah, that's not necessarily wrong. And I have said before that if the trial had been run the way, if it were the opposite and the trial had been run the same way, there would be a lot of complaints about victim blaming here because there's really no proof that he ever struck her. And I've said also that you could wake this man up and start berating him and he never got angry. So, and of course, absolutely, if a Hispanic man put a white woman in a suitcase and recorded himself torturing her to death, you're damn right he'd be getting first degree. But here we are. Luckily, she saw to it that justice was served with her stupid mouth and her ugly heart. The genius Allie Nabshire says, she said she just calls herself Allie Nabshire. I'm calling her a genius. She said she went to bed at midnight, remembers looking at the clock. I think George was already dead when she called Brian and she knew it. She also was stating that the phone was ringing downstairs, so I believe she called Brian from downstairs with the suitcase and dead George inside. By that point, she was so drunk she went upstairs and passed out, figuring Brian had heard and understood her and he would be over to help, like he always did. By the time Brian was calling her back in the morning, she had completely forgotten about everything that transpired the night before and was probably laying in her bed, planning her day of abuse toward George. The shakes started coming, and he hadn't been upstairs to serve her first drink yet, so she went downstairs, and that's when everything came flooding back to her memory. A lot of this is very plausible, and I think that, first of all, that's exactly what must have happened with the call because of course she said whatever she said to him. That I'd still like to know, but it probably didn't make any sense anyway because she was so drunk. She probably said it's an emergency that he got over there and you know he was like, okay, whatever. And she went to sleep smugly satisfied, thinking he'd show up any minute and then forgetting that immediately. I do think he probably fell asleep downstairs, though, and I think she probably fell asleep downstairs all the time. I don't know how many times they actually hit that bed. I also think that it's not possible that she was waiting for him to bring her a drink because he needed money to buy booze, and they did not. I will refuse to believe that they ever went to bed or fell asleep or passed out with any booze left in that house. If they were given a fully stocked liquor cabinet, they still wouldn't go to sleep until it was gone. Or they both died of alcohol poisoning. I mean, there's just no way. And that's why that half bottle or whatever it was, a Woodbridge that she claims was left over, was also a lie. But thank you, Allie Nabshire, for that and for definitely giving some insight into how that call went and why she didn't call him back. It also kind of explains why Brian was a little bit vague about it because he may remember and he may have remembered she called him and was like, oh my God, you have to come over. And he said he would. And then he hung up and went back to sleep. He may not have wanted to say that, because that probably happened all the time. And he probably, understandably so, didn't want to be, negligent in that he could have done something you just never know. And it's possible that they've since learned this from him, but they just haven't brought it up for also good reasons. Luminessa Von B also says Sarah thought Brian would rescue her for her son's sake. And I think most of the times that he did, it was for her son's sake. He brought her out of their house so the son could have consistency and constantly gave her money whenever paid she played the I need food for son's visit card. So why not get rid of this mess you'll be parenting on your own. Little did she know a normal person would see that as an improvement over co-parenting with her. Yeah. I think that he and that's why I have so much sympathy for Brian and um not that I think he's a white knight, but I think he is a good guy and I think that his all of his everything he did was done for the right reason. I think that, like you said, he kept the home so the son had some stability. I think that all the things that he did for Sarah, he did because he figured, divorce can already be traumatizing for children, and so at least his mom was around, and she took advantage of that, of course. And one of the texts that we saw in some of the evidence, I don't think it was in trial, but is that she says she needs money for her son so her son can have hot water, like as if she's using cold water. Just so transparent and stupid. She's so incredibly dim-witted. This from David Price 7162 because this is just cut and dry. Totally agree, he says. Thank you. I don't know what really happened, but I know the idea of hide and seek is utter bullshit. None of her, he said you're it, so you go hide, so I hid in the shower and he tried to hide in the suitcase, makes any sense. Besides, I doubt a guy like George would play a stupid kid's game with a couple of liters of wine in his belly. Agreed. My suspicion is she just coaxed him in there and killed him. And yes, the cleaning of out the closet and donating clothes story is horse crap too. Thank you. Gwen Pigeon says, Sarah is a danger to others, but diabolical and clever enough not to be a danger to herself. Bad human. Yes, she's a danger to others and diabolical, but I'm not sure about clever, and I'm not sure about not a danger to herself either, actually. Okay, this is a comment that actually made me laugh out loud. From Tracy Yen 6937. Love your videos. Thank you. Thank you. I think Brian always had cigarettes and booze. She'd show up under the pretense of fleeing and seeing her son. We remember she's an outstanding mother. Rest in peace, George. Free Brian. This thrilled me to bits because it's exactly, first of all, you're probably right. And I mean, that makes sense, complete sense. I wish we knew if they were out of booze when she left. Probably. I mean, this is either she was punishing George or she was just like, all right, well, we're out of cigarettes and booze, but I know who's got some. Oh my gosh, she's so horrible. Thank you, Tracy Ann. This is honorable mention. This is not a theory, but know that 9503. First of all, the name. And second of all she says is love your videos. But look at this baby and tell me how cute that is, that this baby loves my videos. Now we have Luminessa Von B, who is wonderful. Oh, and I'm 100% sure making him call his brother and trying to call his daughters was evidence of one of her cruelest intentions, as if she were making sure they had that last drunken call as their memory of him. She has to control everything. That she does. Luminessa Von B also says, we all know she was lying from the word go, but she was compulsive. The whole story about making George clean the apartment before she allowed him to start drinking was BS. Yes. There were ashtrays full of butts all over the townhome when CSI got there. And she also said they weren't allowed to smoke inside. I know. And Mr. J called her out on that on the stand. He was like, you're not supposed to smoke in your townhome? And she's like, that's right. But you did, right? And she was like, sometimes. Can you imagine? We would still be there if he called her out on every single thing that, he wanted to and we want him to, and every single possible thing he could have. Addie is me says she was having too much fun laughing and bullying George, helpless in that suitcase. She didn't leave until he was dead, and then she called Brian and passed out. First degree. Amen. Absolutely. I mean, they could have charged her with first degree, but I understand why they didn't. T Black DZ5 Bow says, I really appreciate your thoughts about what happened to George and on that terrible night. Thank you. Particularly how you tied it in with the time of death, medical examiners' findings, and timeline of facts that we know. Thank you. What you said about her not caring if George lived is so heartbreaking and cruel. She really didn't care. The way she says he could stick two fingers out and that she would let him squirm or whatever it is. Yeah, and that's what she's saying to the first responder on scene. And countless other cruel things that showed how little he meant to her. I agree with most of your theory, except I'm not sure that even with super crack drunk strength, Sarah could physically put him in that suitcase. That's what most people think. And now, of course, I've come around because it didn't seem that plausible, but I just couldn't imagine how else he could get in there. But I'm sure you're right. But I think it's more likely that she beat him with the bat and then ordered. Yes, that's exactly what I said in the last video. That must have been it, I guess. And then ordered, threatened, cajoled him into the case. He would have done anything she said, particularly being drunk himself, beaten, disoriented, etc. Yeah. Do you think she ever ponders the truth of what she did, even though she was blackout drunk? Could she ever see what everyone else can see so clearly? Her prison text to Brian and her son are so outrageous and abusive. I really wonder if there's any hope for redemption in her future. Well, I've asked myself that question many times. And if anyone here has asked that question and come up with any potential answers, let us know. But it's very hard for me to say. I think she might just believe her own lies and stay staunchly outraged that no one seems to listen to her, understand her. Those texts certainly don't show someone who has the possibility of redemption. And I would say she had 4.5 years to, come around, and she just got worse and worse. So I don't know. There is a part of me that thinks that I think deep down she knows. And, I always think about when they first show her the video in the interrogation and she says, I don't want to watch this, guys. Guys, I don't want to watch this. How long is this? Which is, first of all, balls. I mean, so disgusting. And also shows us a lot about how Sarah deals with being confronted with a bad act of hers. Immediately, she wants to deflect, deny, ignore. She doesn't want to deal with it, which I get. I wouldn't want to deal with that either. But immediately, she was, guys, I don't want to watch this. I don't want to watch this, which shows us that she knew a little something, either from her past videos and I also think it's very interesting that after she saw it, she said, yeah, this looks bad. I get it. But does she? I mean, she obviously did in that moment. She saw that it looked bad, which is the other question I have, because if she saw that look bad, why didn't she think, or did she, that her other videos look bad? I'll just never understand it. Although if we go by most of her behavior and what we can tell from her thought process, it doesn't matter. The evidence does not matter to her. She will just say whatever. She wants to say that she went on a first date with George and he beat her and did all kinds of things to her and left her in a pile. I mean, and thinks that people are going to believe that? It's nonsensical. It's so insane. And not insane like criminally insane, just crazy, like, I don't know. That's the reason that I'm here and you're here and we're talking about it, because it is so hard to understand. And I've never encountered, either watching criminals or anyone like this. Thank God. So thank you, T Black DZ 5 Bow. Karen Streeter 5150 says, I came back to watch again. I agree with you about her son. Brian said that after their son was born, she started drinking. Right. More. And would bring people home. She never wanted to be a mother. When she said in her interrogation video that she was an outstanding mom to her son, I wanted to throw up. There were times when she didn't pick him up from school. That's right. Her son is better off with her in prison for life, definitely. In her self-serving elocution, she never one time asked for mercy or a lighter sentence so she could spend time with her son because she was too busy spreading her gold. So true. I thought of that too. She didn't mention any of the things she should have mentioned in that allocution. You know, I mean, oh, so disgusting. Deb's daughter says a lot of very nice things to me. And then she says, and thank you, Deb's daughter. And then she says, I agree 100% that she had no regard for his life or health. It simply was not a factor or concern for her, which is truly sad. Her entitlement and disregard for George is astounding. I appreciate you and I'm subscribing. Rest in peace, George. Thank you. Yeah, Deb's daughter, I agree with that. It is astounding and it's incredibly sad. And it's what's sadder on a larger scale is that now we know that there are people like this who do things like this. And I guess we knew before, but this, she filmed this. Now we have to live with thanks a lot. These Sarah Boone video collection. The unknown texter TXTER 1873 says, I think when Sarah called Brian late night hours before the body was discovered by Sarah, I think Sarah was calling Brian because she had already unalived George and wanted to try to get Brian to dispose of George. Yeah, you're not alone. A lot of people think that. A comment from Kevin Quist. This isn't really about what he thinks happened. We did that last time, but he says, even with the video, had she eaten crow and admitted that they fought in a drunken stupor, she shoved him in the suitcase and pled to manslaughter, she may already be out of jail. But she's too effing arrogant to admit she's not perfect. And this really sums up a lot of the things that I thought throughout this whole thing, because I really feel as though, yes, the video is very damning, for sure. But this did not, had Sarah been a different person, the opposite of who she is, okay? So an intelligent, kind-hearted person who made a mistake and who would admit it. I mean, not that this was, we have to use a little bit of, poetic license here, but had she walked in there, seen this video, and I mean, imagine yourself. I would imagine that if I didn't have any recollection and they showed me this video, first of all, I would already be upset because I wouldn't be living with someone. And even if I was really kind of done with my boyfriend and we were living together and I wouldn't still, I wouldn't want him dead. I mean, so they show you a video of you doing this to someone who certainly at one point you loved and according to you still do. Can you imagine your reaction to that? That alone really sealed her fate in a way because she followed suit afterwards. But I think that most of us, I can only speak for myself. So I would, first of all, start crying. I would be so horrified and devastated that I had done this. I mean, I probably would have already because, unlike Sarah, I wouldn't be like, I don't know where this is coming from. But to watch that would be really devastating. And then afterwards, I mean, even if I didn't give a shit, I would start apologizing and saying I was drunk and saying I've got a problem. I mean, just because I'm not an idiot, But clearly she didn't care. And this brings me to another comment, which I will find in 4 hours. Just sit tight. From Karen Streeter 5150. What bothers me is that from the 911 call to the trial, she never shed one tear or showed any remorse. And this is so true, and it's unusual. Usually there's at least some crying for oneself. She didn't cry. Really, I mean, the only fake crying we even saw her do was during the interrogation when she was really desperate. She was bringing out the big guns to try and, So, yes, Karen, it's quite impressive. Now we have Kendall Dad, new subscriber. Welcome. We're all new. I haven't been here this long. Have followed this case from its conception, and this video came up on my feed. Excellent analysis, and I agree with your theories. Thank you. There was no hide and seek, just as there was no CPR. Sarah is a pathological liar, so everything she says is suspect. Did they have a toxic relationship? Absolutely. However, the battered spouse and victim is George, who was pushed to the edge every day just as Brian was. Correct. Her narcissism and alcoholism controlled her. They came before everything, including her son. Absolutely. I, too, believe George was attacked with the bat and then thrown down the stairs. Sarah had all morning to come up with the story. Drunk and panicked, hide and seek in the suitcase was devised. Though nonsensical, she was now committed to that story. For 4.5 years, she stuck to her story until she was told she needed an overt act to claim battered spouse or self-defense. Suddenly, that's the act I couldn't remember in the last one. I was like, what's that act, for BSS? Overt act. Suddenly, everything changed. Amazingly, in the 11 minutes that she didn't record, George, on his last breaths in the suitcase, became combative. Now Sarah is the victim. So terrified for her life, she goes to bed. We didn't buy it, and neither did the jury. With absolutely no remorse, her elocution was all about Sarah. Poor me. Always the victim. Karma sent her to Lowell, one of the worst women's prisons in the nation, where inhumane conditions are now her life. A facility where her antics will not be tolerated. Soon Brian will be free of her, and hopefully he and their son, along with George's family, can move forward in peace. Looking forward to following more with you. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to you following me more with me too. This is very, very excellent. This is it's such a concise but thorough view of what happened and what drove it, and the past, present of this, and future. And thank you for this. So I had also said in the first video that during the 3 weeks that George was in jail, Brian had said that she was actually met her parental custodial obligations. And so I was kind of wondering why that is, and kind of, just pontificating as I do. Sarah Bridget, 84, says, I agree about those 3 weeks. She told the police on those call outs that George called her a bad mother. That's exactly what I was thinking of, Sarah Bridget. I also wonder if it was actually George that bought the alcohol in the majority of the time with his money from work, bringing it home after his shift. Definitely. I mean, I would imagine. When he could, I mean, and I'm sure he could, certainly toward the end of the relationship, because by that time she had told him, don't send money to your kids anymore. Eve 711 says, I don't believe the I went upstairs to sleep BS. Sarah was blotto, blackout drunk, and it would be a better explanation for what transpires. But she cannot allow herself to admit any weakness. That's correct. I believe that George had enough and was going to pack and get the hell out of her demented circus, but she snapped, beat him with the bat to unconsciousness, flipped him into the suitcase, and sent him down the stairs. George is talking in a very confused fashion in her infernal video, as if he'd been popped in the noggin, poor guy. Yeah. She passed out and came to after George had died, around the same time she drunkenly called Brian, and he ignored Drunky, as so many other times. She and George may have been slight, but the amount of booze they consumed was prodigious and could lead to this disaster. Yeah, and Sarah's horrible disposition could lead to disaster under any circumstances. Yeah, thank you, Eve. Melanie McNeil, PH8YZ, says, I have never thought she went to bed. She was having too much enjoyment watching him suffer. I think she watched him until he died and passed out on the couch. Just Call Me Marita says, they got into a fight when they were upstairs and George said he was going to leave. He pulled out the suitcase and Sarah grabbed the bat and beat him. He was probably unconscious for a minute or two, giving her enough time to put him in the suitcase and zip it up. That's when she snapped the first picture at 11:03 before she took the video. Then, through her own testimony, she said that it slipped. Right. We can't trust her testimony, but she pushed it down. My guess is it didn't slip. But yes. That's when he goes down the stairs. At that point, her adrenaline was pumping so hard she went into a blackout drunken state. That's when she started filming him. During the time that she stopped recording, I believe he found a small opening that he could put his hand through. Sarah got the bat and hit his hands, which is why the autopsy found bruised fingers. That was when she filmed those last few seconds, and then I believe she went upstairs to call Brian and ask him what she should do. After he hung up on her, she sat there for a minute wondering what she should do, and then she passed out. Yeah. I think every story we could tell about, every true story about Sarah ends with, and then she passed out. Or, as she says, fell asleep. Hit the bed. Yeah, thank you. Just call me Marita. Thank you for that. I think it's good. I also thought that she put him in the suitcase, but I've had to go back on that because I don't think that's plausible. Geospasmic says, your version made me think about a few things, like George was actually packing to leave. For some reason, it didn't occur to me. I've always had trouble with the theory that George was unconscious when he was put in the suitcase. He's small, but he was very tightly packed. I've never tried, but I imagine it would be very hard to put someone who is dead weight in that position and get it close. Yeah, it's hard to do, I've heard, and anything with dead weight. Dabs for Dummies 7269 says, I've always thought she dared him into the suitcase after hearing they were both very competitive. Keep up the great work. Thank you. Yes, I've heard this too from more than one person. I know one was a neighbor of theirs that was interviewed, and not by the police, by actually someone on YouTube. That might be where you're getting it too. And someone else too. I think that was the general consensus that they kind of had that thing about them. And that had crossed my mind also. I tend to, now that I've heard theory about how she woke him up and, like, while he was still disoriented, told him to hide in the suitcase, and he did. I think that that's really a very good possibility. Although I'm not sure that means that she intended to kill him. I think she just intended to torture him a little bit, you know. But I think that that's a very good theory. MJUU2VJ said, this also has nothing to do with theories, but Just a Lazy Gamer released the sidebars from the BOONE trial. Thought you might be interested. Cheers. I had heard him talking about it, and then, of course, I immediately went to watch them. And I'm reading this just to tell you that Lazy Gamer has the whole transcript of the, I mean, it's on the court website. The transcript is available, but he reads the sidebars, and they're pretty interesting. I'll have to go over that in some way at some point. Brandy Shellman 697 says, I think he was definitely in the suitcase when she pushed him down the stairs. Then she proceeded to video her tormenting and torturing him. I think she knew he was dead way before the next day, which explains the call to Brian. Then she had all that time to clean up and concoct her ridiculous story. Then called Brian again, hoping he would help her as he always had before. Her demeanor was not that of a person just finding their boyfriend dead in a suitcase. She had hours to sober up and calm herself down. She is a big old lying liar. You got that right. And Brandy Shellman 697 also had another comment saying that rigor mortis would have set in. So I think we've established that too. Thank you, Brandy. And yeah, this tracks. I mean, I'm not sure how much time she spent awake and sobering up, or even, I mean, I think the story, she had probably an hour of lying there or trying to figure out, once she realized what was going on there, she came up with something. But she does seem to have anxiety. And so I'm not sure. I don't think, I've said this before, but I don't think Sarah can really spend a lot of time on her own. I think she's compulsive about that's why she's always texting and always calling and always getting drunk, It does help with, that is a form of self-medicating if you have anxiety. But yeah, I think she must have known he was dead. I just wish that I really thought, I mean, then they brought up some very important, like logistical factors in the trial, but I'm sure that they probably put together a more cohesive story there, but they just didn't share it, which is too bad because I'd like to know it. Oh, and Kendall Dad also, I had read his theory earlier. It was very good. He said that, Karma has put her in Lowell Correctional Facility, which is not known to be a very good facility. And then he adds that her antics will not be tolerated at Lowell. I would be surprised to see her. I wouldn't be surprised to see her move out of state for her own safety, just as it happened to Daryl Brooks and Charlie Adelson. Yes, except I've never seen a woman, I don't think, who has been moved out of a facility, because women's prisons are very different. Women tend to, they don't have the same code of ethics where, like, if you've committed one kind of crime, your days are numbered there. They tend to stick together, I think, because women are already, minorities, and so they have that sisterhood, and somehow it just doesn't play out that way. It's just, I've never known of a female inmate to have to be moved, but if anyone knows of one or two or more, let me know. Thank you, Kendall Dad. Since Sliced Bread 7422 follows up and says, "Hey there, thank you very much for reading my comment regarding that night." Thank you for the comment. To answer your question, I think Sarah drunkenly dialed, because I was asking, what do you think she said to Brian when she called him? Drunkenly dialed Brian's number that night to boast about George's predicament. Brian confirmed that she often called him late at night, and he'd learned to ignore her. This really ticked Sarah off, though, because she reframed it in her interview the next day as the boy crying wolf. Sarah was the boy crying wolf. She had phoned Brian so many times previously, demanding his help, that Brian had learned to switch off and offer her a deaf ear. This time, however, she really needed his help, but Brian ignored her for her umpteenth cry of wolf. And that's what Sarah's like. She's not one to let things go. You got that right. So she repeated this phrase over and over again to the scoundrel detectives, probably giving herself an A+ for using her pain so creatively. Maybe, although I think she probably used her pain creatively all the time and always got an A+, and that's where she got all the A's, from herself. It's very possible. I mean, she didn't say cry wolf. She said something else. She said it slightly incorrectly, of course. I have to go back and look at that. That's a very interesting take on it, and and I think I wrote back in the comments and said this, that if you listen to all of the things that Sarah says about literally everyone, judge, lawyers, former husband, George, everyone who she doesn't like, what she describes is herself to a T. To a T. All of the lawyers are lying. None of them are listening to her. Brian is controlling and mean, and all those things. She used the word mean a lot too. It's like, you came up with fractious. You can't come up with something other than mean. And she also just wants people to be nice to her, which is very interesting, all things considered. I also just want to give a special shout out to Linda HK9R. Olive Oil 608 says, "I just want to know what's what and how many." Olive oil, don't we all? JM the Composer says, "Why did Sarah flip the suitcase? It's because she was using the bat to hit the suitcase with George inside. Except that the suitcase has a rigid frame, so she needed to flip it in order to inflict maximum punishment." I agree. Why was the suitcase upside down to begin with? That's how it came to rest after she pushed it down the staircase with George inside. Definitely. Robisis1 or Robisis1. What if she told him to get out of her house? When he attempted to follow her orders, she said, "Please don't go." He kept packing, and she brought the bat into play. I'm right here with you. I have dealt with some truly evil people during my life. I'm sorry. But everything about her hits me in such a way that I'm not ready to let this go either. Life was not enough, and I pray for Brian and his son in the ongoing family court case. I literally think about George all the time, and I never knew the guy. I cannot fathom what his family is going through, because I, as a complete stranger, don't have the closure yet. I'm glad you're still doing this. I promise it helps a lot of us. Good, I'm glad. And yeah, I think about George a lot too. I had sent, when I first saw the Interrogation, I sent it to my best friend to watch, because if there's something that, what we call it is, we can't be alone with this, we share it so that we're not alone with it. and she's into true crime too, but she hadn't heard about this case. And at this time, we weren't watching that much YouTube. I was just getting started and really basically only watching YouTube. And she, of course, then also became completely obsessed with this. We watched the trial together. We really were like, we had planned to watch the trial the week before we were going to Puerto Rico. But of course, because of the hurricane, that Owens called a divine intervention. Only Owens would call a potentially deadly storm divine intervention, but it was late. So we were on the beach in Puerto Rico watching the trial as we were. And I was thinking about George then too, because I was on the beach in Puerto Rico. So I feel you. And she and I both Sarah is part of our everyday vernacular. We have certain, all of our like bestie lingo has been infused by her, and all of her nonsense and what's what and how many. And if you don't mind, please. So yeah, we have to, that's why it does help to find humor. And she's a humorous character, unbeknownst to her. Jesse B says, if she intentionally killed him, why? I have so many whys. Yeah, we all have a lot of whys, Jesse B. But I mean, I personally don't think she intentionally killed him. I just don't. First of all, I don't think she'd want him gone because she was really enjoying herself with him. And yeah, I just don't see that. But so I wouldn't know the answer to that, because I don't know the answer to things that I do believe are true. You're welcome. KPM1166, who has a very cute picture of a doggy here. Hi. I think she passed out on the couch too. I think you're right. I'd like to know why he had medication in his syringe. I think he was packing to leave based on the items in the suitcase, or she was throwing his stuff in it, screaming at him to get out. She beat him while he was in the suitcase. I pray he was gone by the time she did that. Me too. And as I read this, and I think I wrote you back and with the answer I'm about to give, but now that I'm thinking about it, I always said that he was packing. I just think that she started it. But if she was packing for him, she wouldn't have put his documents in there. And we know that because she'd keep those to hold over him. And the medication in the syringe was a medication that I don't remember the name now, but it's a medication that's given to alcoholics during the recovery process. It helps to kind of levels you out when you're recovering, when you're detoxing, basically, I guess, or it helps you if you're wanting to drink. It helps you from breaking your sobriety, I believe. I don't know that many details about how it works exactly, but I know that's what it's for. Crystal Lachance 657. I get pissed when people in the comments say that George was an awful person and abuser. I don't believe he abused her even one time. I don't either. She was the abuser 100%. She abused Brian too, and would then tell their marriage counselor that Brian abused her as well. I know. That was the final straw for Brian, yeah. And he had a lot of straws there. I mean, wow. She was running their marital home, as she calls it, with their son in it, like it was a frat house or a whorehouse. I don't even know. Just saying. She continues to abuse Brian to this day, yes. She's so vile and disgusting. Her fake religious crap is vomit-inducing too. Amen. Because, I mean, that I don't like that, obviously. I'm not a very religious person, but I respect people who have a lot of faith, and there are a lot of good religious people in this world. And when people do shit like this, it really enrages me. I mean, also, just disgusting. She's just a rotten person to her core. She really is. Can't wait till she gets smoked in family court and her appeals get denied. Me too. There are also people who do this with religion. They're always hypocrites. And that's probably my least favorite characteristic, is a hypocrite. And someone who's judgmental, which is kind of the same thing. MJ-UU2VJ says, outstanding video again. Thank you. I think she knocked George out upstairs with a bat, possibly, as you say, he finally had enough. Shoved him into the suitcase. She also took a photo that appears to be in a different location than the before videos. Then used her crack strength to get the suitcase downstairs, fumbling at the top of the stairs. Rest in peace, George. Thanks for posting your thoughts. Thank you for posting your thoughts. Yeah, I'm not sure if she would be able to get him into the suitcase, but she definitely pushed him down the stairs in the suitcase, and you know the rest. Helen Someone 6167 says, and a few people have made this comment, I don't know if I'll come across those as well, but that she wasn't a good mother because she has been talked to by CPS after she posted a pic of her son in a suitcase. She planned it and she knew full well the dangers. So, yes, that picture was posted. I think it was her and Brian. They were playing around with their son because they were going on vacation. CPS, this is what's interesting, is that somebody who saw it on Facebook contacted CPS, which is Child Protective Services, for those who use a different term for that. And I thought, someone somewhere must hate her because that's not the kind of thing, maybe it is, but I've never heard of that. That's not generally done. I don't know. And it turned out to be nothing, which also means CPS is not perfect, to put it nicely. But this was, Brian was involved in this, so that's how we know that it wasn't sinister. But certainly it makes it, they didn't have to bring it out, but I'm sure they would have if she was claiming that she didn't know that this could kill someone, because she knew. She'd get in trouble for that. And also she's a terrible mother, but that's not why. We have more examples of how terrible a mother she is just from the body cam and her letters. Karen Neasley 288 says, even just her statement to the 911 call puts in second-degree murder. I put my boyfriend in the suitcase. We were playing. I fell asleep. Then I woke up. He was dead in the suitcase. Yeah. Oh, here's Mystery 207 also says she had Scud called for her putting her son in a suitcase. I believe they have video or photo. Yeah. Teresa Feeney 2756. There was no hide and seek. The suitcase was always in the closet, and I think Sarah planned the attack. I don't think she planned the outcome. Me neither. Me too, and me neither. You could tell she was guilty because of the way she gave way too much information to the 911 dispatch. We all know Sarah didn't perform CPR on George either. That's right. Well, Sarah is just where she belongs, in prison for the remainder of her life. We will never stop hearing from her either, because there will always be something she's going to complain about. Right. Hopefully she'll stop getting a platform for it, because we've probably heard her complain enough. Who gives a shit about what she has to complain about? She should have plenty of complaints. She deserves it. And she'd have them anyway. Tracy Murgatroyd 632 says, thanks for another excellent analysis. You're welcome. There was a child safety gate at the bottom of the stairs for her dogs. I think the crash that shook the wall was poor George hitting it after being jettisoned down the stairs in that suitcase. How she got him into it, I really don't know. I do think it would be very difficult to manhandle an unconscious person into a suitcase. Also, he seemed to be aware of his predicament during the snuff movie, so maybe Sarah ordered a drunken George to get into it from her bully pulpit upstairs, and as ever he obeyed. Guess we'll never know for sure, as Miss 911 P. Shorts on Fire Boone isn't ever going to come clean. That's right. What you said about her transferring her abuse to her son is absolutely true and documented from her jail text messages. That's right. To him, I hope the family court helps Brian to sever all ties from that dreadful woman futuristically. I hope so too, and I think they will, because, I don't know exactly what the family court has access to and what they look at, but if they look at her allocution or any of these texts to Brian and her son, which I'm sure Brian has a folder full of, she's never getting anything. She's too stupid to know it. Thank God. So thank you, Tracy. This was excellent. Linda McMahon, 2471. My theory is the trigger for all of this was when George lost his jobs, therefore no money for booze. Brian probably didn't give her money whenever she asked, so she took her anger out on George. So when George had enough, he started packing his suitcase and she flipped out and sacked him in the head with the bat. Inside the suitcase was medication, a tie, a few of George's shirts. Inside the suitcase was medication, a tie, a few of George's shirts, court papers. So he was packing. She knocked him out and stuffed him in there and threw him down the stairs, where he came to, as she started taunting him. She passed out on the couch. If you notice from the body cam, the next morning the bed was made. She woke up at some point and realized he was still in there dead and called Brian to dispose of the body. He wouldn't answer. Also, there was a phone call to Brian he refused to discuss. So that's the call. Sarah asked him to dump the suitcase, but Brian said no. He has always been the cleanup guy. So Brian told her to call 911 multiple times. She went out back and drank more booze. She didn't have more booze. That's the only thing I disagree with. I don't think there was no booze in the house. No booze left. I think she drank a Dr. Pepper. She would have been drinking booze had she had any. Drank some booze and smoked, thinking of her plan, and staged the scene to look innocent. The rest is history. Of course, no CPR, because how dare he leave her? So she was mad at him. No remorse. My 2 cents. Yeah, right. And also, how dare he do this anyway? Because this has been a huge pain in her ass, And obviously, it's not her fault, because no malicious. Olive Oil 608 says, I have been thinking about this video. Sarah is so wicked. If we knew the real truth of what happened, we wouldn't sleep. That is very true, in my opinion. There's a special place in hell for her. Like her very own jail table that was just hers, she will have her own pit. Just times 200. Yeah, I know. That's why I say, like, if we knew what actually happened, we saw what actually happened there, we would not believe it. And she would have still insisted on going to court and taking the stand and pleading innocent, insisting she's innocent. Oh, Christiana 5 says, also, I haven't looked recently, but I recall a news article recalling the possible CPS visit in regard to using a suitcase previously to put her young son in it. Yes. Oh, also, so what I was going to say about the safety gates is, I don't think those safety gates were up most of the time, if ever, really. Sarah is full of it, as we know, and I'm just not sure that those were really. I think the suitcase crashing into the wall would have done enough, or they were there and not closed. Maybe they were closed. I don't know, but that could have also added to the noise for sure. Granny Smith 123 says, Brian literally transferred money to Sarah's account the Sunday they went to Publix for the wine. That's right. She's just a mean, narcissistic barfly. And I love that, because it's just a simple way of summing her up in a very lowbrow way, which she would hate. She's just it's true, it's just a mean, narcissistic barfly, which is like, ugh. I mean, mean barflies are bad enough. Barfly, okay, do you. But mean narcissistic barfly is like, ugh. Mean narcissistic anything is ugh, but mean narcissistic barfly means you're also good and drunk. I'm also not sure if the trigger was George losing his job. Although, listen, I think everything triggered her. I think that two things are true. Well, many things are true and many things are not. But with Sarah, certainly two conflicting things can be true at the same time. I don't think Sarah liked George working for obvious reasons, because he wasn't in her sight. I have a theory that's based on nothing, that when Sarah and George, well, it's based on common sense, I guess, and what I know of people in this situation, but when they met, George had a full-time job at Ace Hardware, and it became part-time because he wasn't showing up that much. And it seems to me that his manager really liked him, and she kind of knew what was going on there. And I think that they switched him to part-time so that he could keep his job. And, it's true, the store closed, which is such a terrible blow, because like I said, now he's got a record. So it's going to be much harder for him to find a job and just and get to a job, just everything. But Sarah would have been angry at both things. First of all, she was never going to let him get a job again. That's a given. She was too controlling to ever let him leave the house again. And she would also complain because they wouldn't have money. I mean, this was not going to end well no matter what, for sure. Eventually, he would have gotten out. I just wish he had been a little bit more careful about it and had done it, been able to do it. I love Barbara King 70692 because she's very to the point. She beat him with the baseball bat, then locked him in a suitcase and went to bed. The end. Given her size and condition of being very drunk, I feel like she got must have got him to cooperate somehow. Yeah, that's what we feel like, and I think at this point it might be unanimous. No one's really fighting that. I'm the only one who thought she put him in there. But yeah, but we don't know how. Although I still stick very possible. And then of course there's the possible could have been that could have she could have turned it into a game. But my guess is that by then things may have been a little ugly already. So she either threatened him to beat him into it or woke him up and said, "Get in the suitcase real fast." Although, yeah, I don't know. Maybe she knocked him unconscious and then woke him up and did that. Oh, fuck knows. She's so crazy. Dana Lynn says, I agree 100% that it was Sarah who initiated the suitcase activity. I think she pulled out the suitcase herself and ordered him to start packing and get out of my effing life. Yeah. To be read in Sarah Boone's shrill, disgusting, drunken voice. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can do that. I mean, maybe she did then start packing and maybe he did then start packing and she crept up behind him, beat him with the bat, whacked him several times and maneuvered his battered body into the suitcase. She definitely crept up and beat him with the bat. That we know. And yeah, I think she brought out the suitcase and told him to start packing too. She's always telling him to get out of her life. And he's always saying, I love you. And she's, I don't love you. And never, it's over, she loves that. But this time she got a rude awakening when he was like, you know what? Good idea. So, and that's the price he paid with his life. Okay, so I hope I didn't miss any, but there might be some more also after this. I don't know. I tried to get them all in here because I'm trying to make this a nice long video for you because you're my people and I want to give my people what they want. It'll probably take about 6 weeks to upload into YouTube, so I'll see you next year. Thank you for watching and thank you for contributing and thank you for everything and I will see you very soon. Bye.